"You can't go that deep, nobody can," they said. But the instructor just smiled quietly, because he had descended to 400 feet 312 times in his life. But nobody knew that. Richard Coleman had been teaching diving on the same beach for 14 years. Every morning at 6:30, he'd arrive, prepare the equipment, and talk with his students. A humble, calm man who never bragged. Nobody knew what he had experienced in his past. When he stood on that beach, looking out at the ocean, the same scene always came to mind. During the darkest days of the Cold War, at 400 feet deep, that moment when he descended alone to save his friend's life. But he never shared these stories with anyone, until the day 2 young divers went missing. Welcome to the last stand. Have you ever been deep-sea diving? How did you feel in the depths of the ocean? Share your experiences in the comments. Monterey Bay's dive center was quiet at 6:30 a.m. When Richard Coleman turned his keys and opened the door, he breathed in the salt air from the sea. This routine hadn't changed for 14 years. Richard was 56 years old, medium height, gray-haired, with a calm face. He never hurried when moving, never raised his voice when speaking. His students knew him as the calmest instructor, but Richard had unnoticed qualities. The sensitivity of his fingers when checking equipment, the focus in his eyes when reading pressure gauges, the authority in his voice when giving safety instructions to students. These weren't typical of an ordinary diving instructor. His students were arriving. Jennifer Hayes, retired teacher, 3rd week. Mark Patterson, young engineer, taking advanced course. Linda Rodriguez, nurse, weekend hobby. Richard knew each of them, knew their strengths and weaknesses. But none of them knew who he really was. Richard's daily routine had strange details. His first task every morning was checking weather reports, not just the surface, but the deep currents too. "Teacher, why do you check so many details?" Jennifer had asked last week. "The sea is deceptive," Richard had said. "There's much more beneath than what shows." When checking diving equipment, he acted as if it were a vital mission. Every regulator, every weight belt, every mask, no detail escaped his notice. "Do we need to be this thorough?" Mark had asked. Richard had stopped and looked at him. The difference between life and death lies in the details. His strangest trait was how he looked at deep-water diving equipment. These were stored in the back section of the shop in locked cabinets. Rebreather systems, thermal protection suits, underwater communication equipment. "Why don't we use these?" When they asked, Richard's expression would change. As if he was remembering somewhere very distant, very dark. On the morning of October 25, Richard was keeping the Coast Guard radio on. This was also a strange habit. At 8:30, an emergency call came. "All dive centers, this is an emergency. 2 young divers missing. Michael Chen, 24 years old, software engineer. Sarah Williams, 22 years old, marine biology student. Lost at 200 feet depth off Point Sur. Last radio contact at 8:45. Richard froze at the radio. He knew these coordinates. That area was the most dangerous part of Monterey Canyon. Underwater ridge formations, unpredictable currents, complete darkness. His students were starting to arrive, but Richard said, "Class canceled today, emergency situation." Within an hour, the beach was crowded. Coast Guard cutters, rescue boats, ambulances, media. Lieutenant Commander Patricia Hayes explained the situation. "Conditions are extremely dangerous. Water temperature 45 degrees, zero visibility, strong underwater currents. Human rescue in these conditions is extremely risky." Senior Chief Rodriguez spoke clearly. 200 feet depth, zero visibility, strong current, hypothermia risk. Sending a human diver in these conditions is a suicide mission. "We can only search with ROV." The ROV operation had started, but results weren't promising. "The ROV can't maneuver through those rock formations," said the technician. "Too many obstacles." Richard stepped forward. "I can go down." Everyone turned to look. A 56-year-old, gray-haired, ordinary-dressed diving instructor. Senior Chief Rodriguez. "Sir, this is a professional rescue operation only. I am a professional rescue specialist. Being a diving instructor doesn't mean being a rescue diver. This is a suicide mission." Richard smiled quietly. For 30 years, how many times had he heard these words? Too deep, too dangerous, nobody can go. but he had descended to 400 feet depth 312 times in his life. "I'm Richard Coleman, Master Diver, U.S. Navy Submarine Rescue Command," he said quietly but clearly. Commander Hayes looked skeptical. Richard pulled out his metal ID card from his pocket. "Department of Defense ID, still valid for emergencies. Active duty from 1988 to 2010. USS Squalus recovery, USS Scorpion search operations, Cold War submarine emergencies. 22 years experience. 312 deep water rescues." Commander Hayes examined the card. Everything was correct. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" "Because that life is behind me. I'm just a diving instructor now. But today, 2 kids are down there and we're running out of time." That moment changed everyone's life on that beach. Richard ran to the dive center. From the back room, he pulled out his old equipment: deep water rebreather system, military-grade thermal protection suit, underwater communication equipment, emergency ascent gear. He hadn't used it for 14 years, but muscle memory never forgot. Every system check, every connection, every backup protocol, just like the USS Jacksonville emergency in 1995. Commander Hayes watched with interest. "This equipment is military specification. Navy surplus," said Richard. The truth was, Richard had a complete submarine rescue command center in his home's basement. Systems he hadn't touched for 14 years but never threw away. Jennifer came over. "You never said anything for 14 years. Because that life was too heavy," said Richard while checking equipment. "Life or death decisions every day. You can't make mistakes. When you lose a friend, you never forget." He paused. "But today, duty calls." When Richard entered the water, the crowd on the beach fell silent. Coast Guard boat, escorting alongside, communication team in constant contact. Master Diver Coleman, radio check. "Coleman here, beginning descent." 50 feet. Richard's breathing changed. Rebreather system, perfect buoyancy control. Just like the old days. 100 feet. Water started getting cold. Thermal suit kicked in, visibility decreasing. 150 feet. Complete silence. Only his own heartbeat and communication static. 200 feet. Total darkness. Sonar navigation began. Richard stopped. 30 years of experience kicked in. Current analysis. Bottom contour reading. Systematic search pattern, just like when searching for USS Squalus. Coleman to surface. Reached target depth. Beginning grid search. At 240 feet depth, Richard began applying methodical search pattern. Northeast quadrant, 50-foot intervals, sonar sweeps. He remembered that moment. 1995, USS Jacksonville emergency. Reactor cooling system failure, emergency ascent. Crew trapped in lower compartments. Richard had descended alone to 400 feet, 260 feet. Still nothing. Then sonar caught a signal. Metal object, 280 feet depth, northwest bearing. Richard approached carefully. Rocky outcrop formation, small cave-like structure. And there he saw them. Michael Chen and Sarah Williams, trapped under rocky overhang, air supply critical, hypothermic, consciousness levels dropping. Coleman to surface, survivor contact established. 2 divers located, depth 280 feet. Condition serious but stable, beginning emergency ascent protocol. Sarah was unconscious, hypothermia. Michael barely conscious, panic setting in. Richard came in front of Michael, gently touching his mask to get his attention. He communicated using standard Navy hand signals, making an OK sign to show everything was all right, then moving both hands downward to signal calm down, then pointing to the Navy patch on his chest to show his identity. A light of understanding appeared in Michael's eyes. Professional rescue was here. Emergency ascent procedure began. 2 divers, 1 unconscious, complex decompression requirements, hypothermia risk, limited air supply. Richard had done this procedure hundreds of times, but had never felt this emotionally invested. This wasn't just a mission. This was personal redemption. Dual diver emergency ascent, Sarah in recovery position, Michael semi-conscious, Richard controlling all 3 air supplies and buoyancy systems. 280 feet, 250 feet. First decompression stop at 200 feet. Richard radioed to surface. Emergency ascent in progress. First decompression stop. Both survivors stable. 180 feet. 150 feet. Second stop at 120 feet. Richard checked vital signs. Sarah's pulse weak but steady. Michael more responsive. Richard had written on the underwater slate, "Navy rescue, you're safe." Michael nodded, relief visible in his expression. 100 feet. 80 feet. Final decompression at 60 feet. Richard could see sunlight from above. For the first time in 14 years, he felt that old feeling again. Mission completion. The crowd waiting on the beach was watching the water surface. Coast Guard boats positioned, medical team ready, media cameras rolling. Then they saw 3 heads emerged from the water. Richard in the middle, Michael and Sarah on either side. Spontaneous applause erupted. 200 people were clapping. Emergency medical team immediately took over. Sarah went into cardiac arrest but was stabilized with CPR. Michael had severe hypothermia but was conscious and responsive. "My God," said Commander Hayes. "How did you do that?" Richard, while taking off his wetsuit, "Training. Lots and lots of training. 22 years Navy submarine rescue," said Richard while drying his hair with a towel. USS Thresher investigation, USS Scorpion search operations, Cold War emergency responses. "What was your toughest mission?" asked a journalist. Richard hesitated. 1,995. USS Jacksonville reactor emergency. 15 crew members trapped. 400 feet depth. Time running out. I went down alone. Did you save them? I saved 14. I lost one. Silence. His name was Tommy Rodriguez. He was 19 years old, from San Antonio. It was his first submarine assignment. Richard turned his eyes to the sea. For 30 years, I think about him every day. Maybe I went down today for him. That evening, Richard told the long story. Submarine Rescue Command, classified missions, the most critical years of the Cold War. "Why did you retire?" asked Commander Hayes. "After losing Tommy, I lost motivation. I saw him in every mission. Command suggested PTSD counseling, but I chose civilian life. Do you regret it?" Richard thought, "I ran away for 14 years. But today, I realized you can't run from who you are." Jennifer sat beside him. "You never said anything for 14 years, because that life was too heavy. Someone's life in your hands every day. You can't make mistakes. Perfect performance required. But today was perfect. Today, Tommy dove with me. The next day, Navy called. Rear Admiral Christopher Mitchell, Naval Sea Systems Command. Master Diver Coleman, yesterday's operation was outstanding. We need people like you. Sir, I'm retired. Retirement is a state of mind, son. Unsa Navy, always Navy. We'd like to offer you a consultant position, submarine rescue training program, Richard thought quietly. 14 years civilian life, peaceful existence, no pressure. But that feeling he had underwater yesterday, purpose, mission, belonging. Sir, let me think about it. Take your time. But Coleman? Yes, sir? Yesterday you honored every submarine rescue diver who ever served. Tommy Rodriguez would be proud. A week later, an informal ceremony was held at Monterey Bay. Navy officers, Coast Guard personnel, local media, Richard's students, Michael and Sarah's families. Commander Hayes spoke. Master Diver Richard Coleman, 30 years ago you saved lives serving your country. Yesterday you continued that mission serving your community. Richard was given a plaque, Civilian Life Saving Award, in recognition of extraordinary heroism and selfless service. Richard took the plaque, but what was really valuable were the faces in the audience. Proud Jennifer, admiring Mark, respectful Linda. And sitting in the front row, Michael and Sarah, 2 young people who owed their lives to him. Master Diver Coleman, said Commander Hayes. Any words? Richard approached the microphone. 30 years ago, when I lost Tommy Rodriguez, I couldn't forgive myself. I ran from him for 14 years. But yesterday I understood that the best way to honor fallen comrades is to continue the mission. He paused. Tommy's spirit dove with me yesterday. And when we saved Michael and Sarah, he was saved too. Standing ovation. Richard accepted the Navy consultant offer, part-time submarine rescue instructor. At the dive center, the equipment in the back room is now open. He teaches advanced techniques to his students, provides deep water rescue training. Michael and Sarah recovered completely. Both got advanced certification from Richard. Sarah continues her marine biology PhD. Michael started an underwater robotics company. Every year on October 25, the rescue anniversary, all three dive together at Monterey Bay. Silent tribute for Tommy Rodriguez. Have you ever been deep-sea diving? How did you feel in the depths of the ocean? Do you have experiences like Richard Coleman's, things from our past that we try to forget, but actually define who we are? If you enjoy these powerful stories, don't forget to subscribe to the Last Stand channel. Richard Coleman still teaches diving at Monterey Bay today, but now the equipment in the back room is open. He teaches advanced techniques to his students, provides deep water rescue training. 2 certificates hang on his wall: Navy Master Diver Certification and Civilian Life Saving Award. And every morning when he looks at the ocean, he no longer runs from the past. The memory of Tommy Rodriguez makes him proud, not guilty. Once a rescuer, always a rescuer. Some missions never end.